The warp storm rages, isolating the Imperium Nihilus. A space marine captain stares into the starless void, his faith tested as supplies dwindle and hope fades. In this realm of darkness, loyalty is measured by endurance, not victories. Picture yourself in the ceramite boots of these isolated warriors. How long would you last before chaos's whispers became too tempting? Would you sacrifice your humanity to save those under your protection, or choose death over dishonor? As we recount their tragic fall, prepare to face the ultimate test of faith in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. In a galaxy torn asunder, how far would you go to uphold your duty? In the vast expanse of the Imperium of Man, few sights inspire as much awe and reverence as a space marine standing tall amidst the ruins of a fallen world. Picture, if you will, a lone warrior atop a shattered cathedral, his armor bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, yet his stance unwavering in the face of unimaginable horrors. This is no ordinary soldier, but one of the Emperor's finest, a post-human demigod forged in the crucible of war and tempered by unwavering faith. The creation of a space marine is a complex and perilous process. It begins with the selection of exceptional human specimens, often children, chosen for their physical prowess and mental fortitude. These aspirants undergo grueling trials that push their bodies and minds to the very limits of human endurance. Those who survive are forever changed, their bodies altered by a series of gene seed organ implants derived from the Emperor's own flesh. The process involves the implantation of 19 organs, each serving a unique purpose. The secondary heart enhances endurance, while the os modular strengthens and enlarges the skeleton. The biscopea and hemastamen enhance muscle growth and blood production, and the preomnor neutralizes toxins. The process culminates with the black carapace, a subdermal armor that interfaces directly with their power armor. Each implant is a miracle of imperial science, transforming a mere mortal into a living weapon of unparalleled might. Yet physical prowess alone does not make a space marine. It is their unwavering loyalty, iron discipline, and unshakable faith in the Emperor that truly set them apart. The Celestial Lions exemplify these qualities. Founded in the 38th millennium, they quickly established themselves as steadfast defenders of the Imperium. Their homeworld, Elysium 9, forged warriors of unparalleled resilience and determination. The Lions' combat doctrine emphasized close-quarters combat and lightning-fast strikes, their golden armor a blur on the battlefield. One need only look to the purging of Hive Algol to see the Celestial Lions at their finest. When a Genestealer cult threatened to overrun an entire Hive city, it was the Lions who answered the call. For 3 months, they fought through twisting corridors and nightmarish underhives, rooting out the Xeno's taint with bolter and blade. In the end, it was their chapter master, Orientis Lux, who faced the Patriarch in single combat, emerging victorious even as the Hive burned around them. The Lions paid a heavy price for their victories, their traditions and relics becoming all the more precious for the sacrifices made to preserve them. The Spear of Elysium, a relic power weapon, became a symbol of the chapter's indomitable spirit. Passed down from one chapter master to the next, it embodies the weight of their duty and the legacy they uphold. Perhaps no relic is more revered than the Scrolls of Remembrance. These ancient parchments bear the names of every battle brother who has fallen in service to the Emperor. Before each campaign, the chapter's chaplains recite the names, transforming the fallen sacrifice into inspiration for the living. As the millennia passed, the Celestial Lions' reputation only grew. They became known for their martial prowess and unwavering adherence to the imperial truth. When other chapters might have faltered, the Lions stood firm, their golden armor a beacon of hope in the darkness of the 41st millennium. The tranquility of the Imperium shattered in an instant, as reality itself tore asunder. In the year 999, M41, a cataclysm unlike any other rocked the very foundations of humanity's domain. The Great Rift, a vast warp storm of unprecedented scale, split the galaxy in two. The once proud Imperium, which had weathered countless threats over 10 millennia, now faced its greatest challenge yet. Before this catastrophic event, the Imperium had enjoyed a period of relative stability. Worlds thrived under the Emperor's light, trade flowed between star systems, and the might of the Imperial war machine kept the myriad threats of Xenos and heretics at bay. The Astronomicon, that psychic beacon which guided ships through the treacherous currents of the warp, shone bright and true from holy terror. Then came the fall of Cadia. As Abaddon, the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade reached its brutal climax, the ancient fortress world that had stood guard over the Eye of Terror for millennia, finally crumbled. With Cadia's destruction, the floodgates of the warp burst open. A scream of triumph echoed across time and space as the ruinous powers reveled in their victory. The birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum was violent and sudden. Sister Amelia, a survivor from the Adepta Sororitas outpost on Hydrafor, recounted the horror. The sky split open like a wound, reality itself bled, and the very fabric of space-time twisted into impossible shapes. We fell to our knees, praying for the Emperor's protection as the world around us unraveled. Countless worlds were swallowed whole by this cosmic maw, vanishing into the hellish depths of the warp without a trace. In the wake of this catastrophe, the Imperium found itself in disarray. Entire fleets scattered to the cosmic winds, their navigators blinded by the psychic maelstrom. Sectors once thought secure found themselves isolated, cut off from aid and reinforcement. The Astronomicon's light flickered and dimmed across vast swathes of space. The psychological impact on Imperial citizens was devastating. Panic and despair gripped entire populations as they realized the full scope of their predicament. Cults dedicated to the dark gods flourished in this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, promising salvation to those who would turn their backs on the Emperor's light. The emergence of the Great Rift heralded a new age of strife for the beleaguered Imperium. Chaos warbands poured forth from the tear in reality, laying waste to world after world. Dormant Necron tomb worlds stirred to life, their ancient masters awakening to a galaxy ripe for reconquest. Tyrannid hive fleets, drawn by the psychic beacon of the Cicatrix Maledictum, altered course to feast upon the vulnerable worlds in its wake. Even the Orcs saw opportunity in the chaos, launching massive wars against Imperial strongholds they had long coveted. Perhaps most dire of all was the formation of the Imperium Nihilus, that vast swathe of space cut off from Terra's light and aid. Entire sectors found themselves plunged into darkness, their astropathic choirs silenced by the psychic howl of the Great Rift. These were the Imperium's darkest hours, where even the most stalwart defenders of humanity questioned whether the Emperor still watched over them. It was in this time of unprecedented crisis that our protagonists, the proud Celestial Lions chapter, received their most crucial orders. Their astropathic choir, one of the few still able to pierce the veil of the Great Rift, conveyed an urgent message from the High Lords of Terror themselves. The chapter was to make haste for the Connor system, a vital Imperial stronghold in the heart of the Imperium Nihilus. They were to hold this linchpin at all costs, for its loss would mean the collapse of an entire segmentum. As the Celestial Lions fleet prepared for its perilous journey into the Imperium Nihilus, an eerie silence fell over the gathered warriors. The Great Rift's birth had shaken even these stalwart defenders of humanity to their core. Chapter Master Ekene Dubaku stood on the bridge of the flagship, his golden armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the command deck. His eyes, normally full of fierce determination, now held a hint of uncertainty as he gazed out at the swirling madness of the warp before them. "Brothers," Dubaku's voice rang out, steady despite the gravity of the situation, "we embark on a mission unlike any we have faced before. The Imperium Nihilus calls for aid, and we shall answer." The assembled officers nodded solemnly, each aware of the enormity of the task ahead. The fleet's transition into the warp was a harrowing experience. As they passed through the veil between real space and the immaterium, the ship's Geller fields strained against the intensified chaos energies. The psychers aboard screamed in agony, their minds assaulted by the cacophony of demonic whispers that sought to penetrate the protective barriers. Even the Space Marines felt a creeping unease, as reality itself seemed to bend and twist around them. Days stretched into weeks as the fleet traversed the tumultuous currents of the warp. The navigator, her third eye constantly weeping blood, guided them through treacherous eddies and whirlpools of madness. At times, the very hull of the ship seemed to groan and flex, as if trying to tear itself apart. When they finally emerged into real space near their assigned sector, the chapter found itself immediately beset by threats from all sides. A Necron tomb world had awakened in a nearby system, its armies of soulless machines already harvesting nearby planets. To the galactic east, an Orc Wah gathered strength, while whispers of chaos cults festered among the desperate populations of imperial worlds cut off from Terra's light. The strategic challenges of operating without reliable reinforcements or communication with Terra quickly became apparent. Dubaku and his command staff pored over star charts and fragmented astropathic messages, trying to piece together a coherent picture of the sector's defenses. They knew that every decision carried immense weight. A single misstep could lead to the loss of entire worlds. Despite these obstacles, the Celestial Lions scored early victories against the encroaching threats. A lightning strike against the Necron Tomb World's command structure bought precious time for nearby Imperial forces to evacuate endangered populations. The chapter's famously aggressive close combat doctrine proved devastatingly effective against Orc raiding parties, crushing several minor wars before they could gain momentum. Yet, with each victory came a cost. The constant warfare took its toll on both the Space Marines and the civilian populations they strove to protect. Entire companies of battle brothers fell in desperate last stands, their names added to the chapter's scrolls of remembrance with alarming frequency. Hive cities burned, agri-worlds were reduced to lifeless husks, and millions of Imperial citizens were displaced or slaughtered in the never-ending conflict. As months turned to years, a pall of exhaustion settled over the Celestial Lions. Even these superhuman warriors began to show signs of strain. The chaplains worked tirelessly to maintain morale, but doubt crept into the hearts of even the most devout. How long could they hold out against the endless tide of enemies? Would reinforcements ever come from the Imperium proper? Then came the moment that would test the chapter's resolve like never before. A massive Chaos war fleet, a splinter of Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, tore its way into the sector. Led by a fearsome Chaos Lord known as the Crimson Scourge, this force threatened to overwhelm the entire region in one fell swoop. The ensuing battle was apocalyptic in scale. Void warfare raged across entire star systems as Imperial Navy remnants and the Celestial Lions fleet engaged the Chaos Armada. On a dozen worlds, the golden-armored Space Marines fought with desperate fury against hordes of cultists, traitor guardsmen, and demonic entities. The Celestial Lions stood at the precipice of oblivion. Void warfare raged across the sector, their golden armor tarnished by the blood of countless foes. On a dozen worlds, Space Marines clashed with hordes of cultists and traitor guardsmen, each battle more desperate than the last. The chapter's losses mounted with alarming speed, and even these superhuman warriors began to feel the crushing weight of their duty. Brother Captain Nkosi surveyed the carnage from the bridge of the battle barge. Pride of Elysium. His eyes, once filled with righteous fire, now held a haunted look. The constant warfare had taken its toll, not just on their bodies, but on their very souls. He watched as another imperial world burned in the distance, its population overrun by the forces of chaos. How many more worlds would they lose before this war was won? How much more could they sacrifice before there was nothing left to give? The comlink crackled to life, interrupting Nkosi's dark musings. "Captain, we've received a priority transmission from Chapter Master Dubaku. He requests your presence in the Strategium immediately." Nkosi acknowledged the message and made his way through the ship's corridors, the weight of his power armor feeling heavier with each step. In the Strategium, Chapter Master Ekene Dubaku stood before a hololithic display of the sector. His face was a mask of grim determination, but Nkosi could see the strain in his eyes. "Brother Captain," Dubaku began, his voice low and urgent, "I've received intelligence that may change the course of this war. An unexpected source has revealed the existence of an ancient Aeldari artifact hidden aboard the Crimson Scourge's flagship." Nkosi's eyes widened in surprise. "Aeldari technology? Can we trust this information, my lord?" Dubaku's expression tightened. "The source is unorthodox, but I believe it to be genuine. The artifact is said to have the power to seal warp rifts. If we could secure it, we might be able to turn the tide of this conflict." The implications were staggering. With such a device, they could potentially close the Great Rift itself, or at least stem the tide of chaos pouring into the sector. But the risks were equally immense. "A raid on the Crimson Scourge would be suicide," Nkosi said, voicing the thought they both shared. "Indeed," Dubaku agreed, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "And yet, what choice do we have? Our forces are stretched to the breaking point. We cannot hold this sector indefinitely, not against the combined might of Chaos, Necrons, and Orcs. This artifact may be our only hope." As they discussed the details of the potential mission, an uneasy silence fell over the Strategium. Both Space Marines knew that this decision could spell the end of their chapter. If they committed their dwindling forces to this raid and failed, the sector would fall. Millions of Imperial citizens would be left defenseless against the horrors that sought to claim them. Nkosi found himself torn between duty and doubt. He thought of the human populations they had sworn to protect. How many times had they been forced to abandon worlds to their fate simply because they lacked the numbers to defend them all? He remembered the faces of the civilians they'd evacuated, the fear in their eyes as they realized their homes were lost forever. The bitterness of these thoughts shocked Nkosi. He was a Space Marine, created to be humanity's shield against the darkness. Yet here he stood, resentment building in his heart for the very people he was sworn to protect. He pushed the feeling aside, ashamed of his moment of weakness. The whispers of doubt that had plagued Nkosi's mind were soon drowned out by the urgent call to action. Chapter Master Dubaku's intelligence about the Aeldari artifact had set in motion a plan that would test the celestial lions to their very core. As the strike force prepared for their perilous mission, an air of grim determination settled over the assembled warriors. The target was a chaos-held world, its surface a nightmarish landscape of twisted spires and flesh-warped terrain. The air itself seemed to writhe, carrying the stench of decay and the whispers of dark gods. As the drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, the Space Marines steeled themselves for the horrors that awaited them. The moment they touched down, all hell broke loose. Wave after wave of cultists threw themselves at the Celestial Lions, their frenzied attacks fueled by dark promises and forbidden power. The golden armored warriors fought with practiced precision, their bolters roaring defiance against the tide of corruption. "Brother Nkosi, to your left!" shouted Brother Sergeant Chidi, his voice crackling over the vox. Nkosi spun, his chainsword cleaving through a mutated cultist. As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, the Marines began to feel the insidious touch of chaos pressing against their minds. Chaplain Ekweme's voice rang out, his litanies of purity a bulwark against the whispered temptations. "Stand fast, brothers. The Emperor's light guides us through this darkness. We are his sword, his shield, and his vengeance." The words steadied the Marines, but as they neared their objective, the opposition grew fiercer. Demon-possessed tanks lumbered into view, their weapons spewing warp fire that melted ceramite and flesh alike. In the skies above, Helldrakes swooped and dove, their metallic shrieks piercing the very souls of those who heard them. It was in this moment of desperation that Brother Sergeant Chidi made the fateful decision. With a roar of defiance, he charged the nearest demon engine, melter bombs clutched in each hand. His sacrifice bought the strike force the opening they needed, and they surged forward into the heart of the enemy stronghold. The artifact chamber was a blasphemy against reality itself. Reality seemed to bend and warp around a pulsing, crystalline structure that hovered above a corrupted altar. As Chapter Master Dubaku approached, the artifact's true nature revealed itself, a demon sword of immense power, its blades singing with the promise of victory and damnation in equal measure. Dubaku hesitated, his hand hovering inches from the weapon's hilt. The weight of his decision pressed down upon him like a physical force. To take up the sword would be to invite corruption into the very heart of the chapter. Yet to leave it would be to condemn countless imperial worlds to destruction at the hands of chaos. The debate that followed was heated, with battle brothers arguing passionately on both sides. Some, like Chaplain Ekweme, warned of the dire consequences of using such a tainted artifact. Others, their eyes gleaming with the possibility of victory, urged Dubaku to seize this chance to turn the tide of war. Nkosi found himself torn. The resentment he had felt earlier gnawed at him, whispering that perhaps the end truly did justify the means. Had they not already sacrificed so much? What was one more compromise in the face of total annihilation? In the end, it was the weight of duty that tipped the scales. Dubaku, his face a mask of grim resolve, reached out and grasped the demon sword. Power surged through him, and for a moment it seemed as though he might be consumed by it. But the chapter master's will was iron, and he bent the blade to his purpose. With the artifact secured, the Celestial Lions fought their way back to their extraction point. The demon's sword carved a path through the enemy ranks, its unnatural power laying waste to cultists and demons alike. As they lifted off from the corrupted world, a sense of unease settled over the strike force. They had won a great victory, but at what cost? In the days that followed, subtle changes began to manifest within the chapter. The air aboard the battle barge, Pride of Elysium, crackled with an unseen energy. In the days following their victory on the chaos-held world, an uneasy silence had settled over the Celestial Lions. The trophy of their conquest, a demon sword of immense power, lay locked away in the deepest vault of the ship. Yet its presence lingered, a constant whisper at the edge of consciousness. Chapter Master Dubaku stood before the great viewing port of his private chambers, his golden armor reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The weight of command pressed heavily upon him, each decision a step further from the purity he had once sworn to uphold. He turned as the door hissed open, admitting Brother Captain Nkosi. "Report," Dubaku said, his voice carrying a new edge of steel. Nkosi saluted, his movements crisp despite the weariness evident in his stance. "My lord, we've received word from the Connor system. The Chaos forces have withdrawn from 3 worlds in the face of our new tactics." "Elaborate," Dubaku commanded, his eyes narrowing. Nkosi hesitated, then continued. "We've employed orbital bombardments on civilian centers to deny the enemy resources. Our ground forces have utilized demon-infused weaponry, causing mass psychological breakdowns among enemy ranks. The civilian casualties are significant." A ghost of a smile played across Dubaku's lips. "A necessary sacrifice, Brother Captain. The Imperium cannot afford half measures, not here in the Nihilus." As Nkosi left, Dubaku's mind drifted to their recent campaigns. The demon sword had proven to be a weapon of terrible efficiency. Entire hordes of cultists had been laid waste, their corrupted flesh turned to ash by its otherworldly power. Even the most fortified positions of the enemy crumbled before the chapter's onslaught. Yet with each victory, a piece of the celestial lion's soul seemed to chip away. Battle brothers who once prided themselves on precision and honor now reveled in wholesale slaughter. Worlds burned in their wake, sacrificed to deny resources to the enemy. Dubaku told himself it was necessary, that the math of survival in this forsaken half of the Imperium demanded such ruthlessness. Word of the Celestial Lion's new approach spread quickly through Imperial channels. Some hailed them as saviors, the only force capable of stemming the tide of chaos in the Imperium Nihilus. Others whispered of excess, of a noble chapter teetering on the brink of heresy. Inquisitorial eyes turned their way, probing for signs of corruption. Dubaku cared little for their judgment. Let them come, he thought. Let them see what true devotion to the Emperor's will looked like in this lightless realm. The true test of their newfound philosophy came when long-range augurs detected a splinter of Hive Fleet Kronos on a collision course with a densely populated Imperial world. The chapter's librarius, their psychic might bolstered by the demon sword's influence, foresaw the devastation that would follow if the Tyranids made planetfall. Dubaku made his decision without hesitation. The entire Celestial Lion's fleet converged on the system, bringing the full might of their arcane weaponry to bear. As the bioships of the Hive Fleet entered the system, Dubaku gave the order that would forever change the course of his chapter's history. The demon sword pulsed with unholy energy as its power was channeled through the battle barge's weapon systems. Reality itself seemed to scream as a beam of pure warp energy lanced out, tearing through the fabric of space-time. In a blinding flash, the entire system was consumed. Tyranid, human, and all planetary bodies alike were obliterated in an instant. When the light faded, nothing remained but a yawning void where a thriving imperial world had once stood. The Celestial Lions had saved billions from the horror of consumption by the Tyranids, but at a cost that would have been unthinkable mere months before. As news of the Celestial Lions' actions spread, reactions among other Imperial forces were mixed. Some battle brothers of other chapters looked upon them with awe, seeing in their methods the only path to victory against the overwhelming forces arrayed against the Imperium. Others recoiled in horror, recognizing the taint of chaos in the Lion's willingness to sacrifice worlds for victory. The once proud Celestial Lions now stood at a crossroads, their golden armor dulled by the taint of compromise. Word of their extreme methods had spread through the Imperium Nihilus, igniting both hope and horror. Some saw them as saviors, while others whispered of heresy. As the inquisitorial fleet approached, Chapter Master Dubaku watched from the bridge of the Pride of Elysium. His face was a mask of determination, but a chill ran through his enhanced body. "Prepare for inspection," he ordered, his voice silencing all activity. "Secure the relic. No one approaches it without my express permission." The arrival of Inquisitor Vanessa Tole and her retinue was a moment of high drama. Her eyes seemed to pierce through flesh and into the soul as she addressed Dubaku. "We've come to investigate reports of extreme tactics and potential corruption. You will submit to a full examination and surrender all relics of questionable origin." Dubaku's response was measured, but dangerous. "We welcome your presence, Inquisitor, but understand the unique challenges we face here. What you deem extreme is often our only defense against annihilation." As the investigation unfolded, tension gripped the chapter. Battle Brothers were subjected to intense psychic scrutiny, their minds probed for any hint of chaotic taint. The chapter's logs were pored over, each decision dissected and analyzed. Through it all, Dubaku maintained a facade of calm cooperation, even as resentment simmered beneath the surface. In the barracks, Brother Thalius argued with his squad. "We've done nothing wrong. Our actions saved countless lives." But Sergeant Kolo shook his head. "At what cost, brother? We've walked a razor's edge. The Inquisition may be right to question us." The true test came when Tole demanded access to the vault containing the demon sword. Standing before the heavily warded door, Dubaku felt the weapon's pulse, a siren song of power. For a moment he considered refusing, rallying his brothers against these interlopers. But duty stayed his hand. As the vault opened, the sword's malevolent aura washed over them. Tole's eyes widened in horror and fascination. "Emperor, preserve us," she whispered. "Do you comprehend the magnitude of wielding this abomination?" Dubaku stood firm. "We did what was necessary to survive, to hold the line against endless enemies. If that meant embracing weapons our foes fear, so be it." The inquisitorial verdict was harsh. Tole's voice was cold as she read the charges. Unauthorized use of warp-tainted artifacts, excessive civilian casualties in multiple engagements, failure to report potential corruption within your ranks. She paused, her gaze sweeping the assembled Marines. "The Celestial Lions are to submit to extensive purification rites. Your ranks will be decimated as penance. Most critically, you will surrender the demon sword and all associated relics." A ripple of dismay passed through the gathered Space Marines. Brother Thalius stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "My lord, we cannot accept this. Our actions saved the sector." Dubaku raised a hand, silencing him. The weight of command had never felt heavier. He turned to Tole, his voice resolute. "We will comply, Inquisitor, but know this. Without our sacrifices, there might not have been an Imperium left to judge us." As the inquisitorial party departed with the confiscated relics, Dubaku gazed at his brothers. The road ahead would be difficult, but they would endure. They were celestial lions after all, tarnished perhaps, but unbroken. The tension aboard the Pride of Elysium was thick enough to cut with a chainsword. Inquisitor Tole's verdict hung in the air like a death sentence, each word a nail in the coffin of the Celestial Lion's honor. Chapter Master Dubaku stood motionless, his face an unreadable mask of ceramite and flesh. The assembled battle brothers held their breath, waiting for their leader's response. Dubaku's voice, when it finally came, was low and controlled. "Inquisitor, we have cooperated fully with your investigation. We have opened our minds, our records, and our most sacred relics to your scrutiny. And this is your judgment? To decimate our ranks and strip us of the very weapon that has allowed us to hold the line against the forces of chaos?" Toll's eyes narrowed, her voice cold as the void of space. Your cooperation is noted, Chapter Master, but it does not absolve you of the taint that has taken root in your ranks. The demon sword must be surrendered, and your chapter must be purged of its corrupting influence. The air crackled with tension as Dubaku's fists clenched and unclenched. His enhanced mind raced, weighing the consequences of defiance against the cost of compliance. The fate of his chapter, of the entire sector, hung in the balance. It was in this moment of indecision that the first bolter shot rang out. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall, followed by a moment of stunned silence. Then all hell broke loose. Battle brothers who had fought side by side for centuries now turned their weapons on each other. The sacred halls of the battle barge erupted into a maelstrom of weapons fire and close-quarters combat. Dubaku roared for order, his voice lost in the cacophony of battle. He watched in horror as a veteran sergeant, a warrior he had personally mentored, cut down two of his own battle brothers. The sergeant's eyes glowed with an unnatural fire, his armor now adorned with crude, blasphemous symbols etched in blood. The inquisitorial party found themselves caught in the crossfire, their black armor a stark contrast to the golden forms of the warring space marines. Tola barked orders, her retinue forming a protective circle around her as they tried to make sense of the chaos. In the confined spaces of the vessel, the fighting was brutal and intimate. Centuries-old bonds of brotherhood shattered in moments of betrayal. Power armor sparked and rent as blades found weak points, and the acrid smell of promethium filled the air as flamers roared to life. Dubaku fought his way through the melee, his power sword a blur of energy as he cut down those who had succumbed to madness and betrayal. With each fallen brother, he felt a piece of his soul die. These were his men, his responsibility. How had it come to this? As the battle raged, a small group of loyalists managed to fight their way to the vault containing the demon sword. Led by Chaplain Ekweme, they formed a last line of defense against those who would claim the cursed artifact for themselves. The fighting reached a fever pitch as Dubaku and his loyalists converged on the vault. The would-be usurpers, their eyes wild with the promise of power, threw themselves at their former brothers with reckless abandon. The deck ran slick with blood, both traitor and loyalist alike. In the end, it was Dubaku himself who turned the tide. With a roar of righteous fury, he cut down the leader of the rebel faction, his power sword cleaving through armor and flesh alike. As the traitor fell, the fight seemed to go out of his followers. One by one, they threw down their weapons, the madness leaving their eyes as the reality of their actions set in. The silence that followed was deafening. Dubaku surveyed the carnage, his heart heavy with grief and shame. The deck was littered with the bodies of his brothers, their golden armor now stained crimson. The cost of victory was almost too much to bear. Inquisitor Tola emerged from the protective circle of her retinue, her face a mask of cold fury. "This is the proof of your corruption, Chapter Master. Your men have turned on each other like rabid dogs. The taint of chaos runs deeper than we feared." Dubaku met her gaze, his voice weary but resolute. "You're wrong, Inquisitor. This tragedy proves the strength of our resolve. We have purged the corruption from our ranks, but at a terrible cost." Dubaku's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their shared trials. Inquisitor Tole's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp with skepticism. "Strength? You call this bloodshed strength?" Dubaku stood tall, his resolve unwavering. "We've witnessed chaos tear brothers apart, yet our resilience lies in overcoming it." As he spoke, the surviving Celestial Lions gathered around their chapter master, united despite their recent conflict. Tola's gaze swept across the blood-stained deck, her expression unreadable. And the demon sword. Its corrupting influence is undeniable. Before Dubaku could respond, a piercing scream echoed from the vault. Chaplain Ekwemi stumbled out, his face contorted in agony. "The sword," he gasped, collapsing. "It speaks. It knows." Tension thickened the air as the true battle against chaos revealed itself. What dark secrets did the demon sword hold, and at what cost? In the eerie silence, Dubaku made a decision that would alter his chapter's fate. He strode towards the vault, his ceramite boots echoing ominously. Tola moved to intercept, but found herself blocked by a wall of golden armor. "Stand aside," she commanded, her hand moving to her bolt pistol. "By the authority of the Holy Ordos, surrender that cursed artifact." Dubaku paused at the threshold, his back to the gathering. His voice carried finality. "Authority, Inquisitor, in the Imperium Nihilus, cut off from the Astronomicon. What does your authority truly mean?" He turned, his eyes blazing with intensity. "We've held the line against unimaginable horrors, sacrificed everything for an empire that's abandoned us. And now you'd strip us of our only fighting chance?" The Celestial Lions nodded grimly, their earlier conflict forgotten in the face of this new threat. Ekwemi, still on his knees, looked up at his chapter master. "My lord," he rasped, "the sword offers immense power. But the price..." Dubaku's gaze softened. "The price, brother? We've paid in blood and honor. What more can the ruinous powers take?" He entered the vault, seconds stretched into eternity. When Dubaku emerged, the demon sword pulsed in his grip, its malevolent aura consuming the light around it. Tola's composure cracked. "You fool," she whispered. "Do you realize what you've done?" A deafening roar drowned out Dubaku's response. Reality tore as a portal of swirling, noxious energies opened. Voices whispered promises of power, vengeance and salvation. The Celestial Lions watched in horror and fascination as their chapter master faced the warp rift. Dubaku's voice carried an otherworldly resonance. "Great powers of the Immaterium, hear me! We, the Celestial Lions, once proud servants of the false Emperor, now offer ourselves to your service. Grant us the strength to survive in this lightless realm, and we shall be your instruments of chaos." As the portal's energies engulfed Dubaku, Tola's mind raced. She recalled the task force assembled to hunt the fallen chapter, a formidable array of inquisitorial agents and space marines. Their preparations had been meticulous, weapons blessed and warded against demonic influence. Tola's research into the chapter's history now seemed woefully inadequate. Warning signs had been there. The Lions' isolation, their growing resentment towards imperial authority, the whispers of taint that she had dismissed as mere rumors. Now, as reality warped around them, she realized the true gravity of their failure. The task force, even now en route to this forsaken world, would face a foe far more terrible than they had anticipated. As the warp's energies surged, Tole knew that the coming battle would test the very limits of their faith and resolve. The echoes of Dubaku's unholy bargain reverberated through the chamber, his words hanging in the air like a death knell for the Celestial Lion's loyalty to the Imperium. The warp rift pulsed with malevolent energy, bathing the room in an otherworldly glow that seemed to drink in the light around it. Inquisitor Tole's face contorted in a mixture of rage and disbelief, her hand tightening on her bolt pistol. But before she could act, a blinding flash erupted from the tear in reality. When the light faded, the Celestial Lions stood transformed. Their once golden armor now bore the twisted iconography of chaos, pulsing with unholy power. Dubaku, his eyes now twin orbs of swirling darkness, turned to face his brothers. "We are reborn," he intoned, his voice echoing with the whispers of 1,000 demons, no longer shackled by the false emperor's lies. The demonic sword in Dubaku's grip seemed to grow in power with each passing moment, its blade drinking in the very essence of reality around it. As the corrupted Marines began to kneel before their transformed leader, a chilling question hung in the air. What price would the galaxy pay for this unholy alliance? Inquisitor Tola, her composure shattered, stumbled backward towards the exit. "By the Emperor," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising tide of demonic chanting. With a desperate lunge, she activated her personal teleporter, vanishing in a flash of light just as Dubaku's corrupted warriors surged forward. The lone survivor's ship tore through the warp, its jello fields straining against the turbulent currents of the Imperium. Inquisitor Tola sat in her private chambers, her hands trembling as she compiled her report. The weight of what she had witnessed pressed down upon her, each word a damning indictment of her failure to prevent the Celestial Lion's fall. As her ship emerged into real space near Terra, Tola steeled herself for the storm that was to come. The news of an entire chapter's betrayal would send shockwaves through the highest echelons of imperial power. She knew that her own actions would be scrutinized, her decisions questioned. But none of that mattered in the face of the threat now looming over the Imperium Nihilus. The Emergency Council convened in the depths of the Imperial Palace was unlike any gathering in recent memory. Representatives from every major imperial institution crowded into the vaulted chamber, their faces grim as they absorbed the magnitude of the crisis. The air crackled with tension as accusations flew and tempers flared. Lord Guilliman, recently returned to lead the Imperium in its darkest hour, stood at the head of the council table. His face was a mask of stone as he listened to Inquisitor Tola's report. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. "This betrayal," Guilliman began, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of duty, "is not merely a tactical setback. It is a wound to the very soul of the Imperium." His gaze swept across the assembled dignitaries. "But we cannot allow despair to cloud our judgment. We must act, and act decisively." As the arguments raged, a lone figure stepped forward from the shadows. Clad in the midnight blue armor of the Primaris Marines, he bore the insignia of the Celestial Lion's parent chapter. "My lords," he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of service, "I request the honor of leading the hunt for our fallen brothers." Guilliman nodded, a grim smile playing across his features. "Very well, brother captain. Assemble your force. You have the full backing of the Imperium in this endeavor." In the days that followed, a task force unlike any other began to take shape, its purpose clear: to bring the fallen Celestial Lions to justice and stem the tide of corruption threatening to engulf the Imperium Nihilus. In the aftermath of the Celestial Lion's fall, a task force of unparalleled skill and determination began to form. Battle-hardened veterans from the Imperium's most elite forces gathered at a clandestine staging area, their faces etched with grim resolve. The air crackled with a mixture of anticipation and dread, as these warriors, who had faced the horrors of chaos countless times before, prepared for what might be their most harrowing mission yet. Among the assembled heroes, three pivotal questions dominated every conversation. Inquisitor Tola, her face bearing the weight of recent trauma, pored over ancient texts and classified reports. She sought the key to preventing future betrayals within the Celestial Lion's history, a crucial detail overlooked for millennia. As final preparations were made, an unexpected message arrived from deep within the Imperium Nihilus. It spoke of a loyalist faction within the fallen chapter, potentially holding the key to defeating their corrupted brothers and understanding the nature of chaos itself. This revelation sent ripples of hope through the assembled warriors, accompanied by a renewed sense of urgency. Brother Captain Titus, the legendary space marine chosen to lead this perilous mission, stood before a holographic display of the Imperium Nihilus. His eyes, witnesses to countless horrors, now gleamed with fierce determination as he outlined their audacious plan. The corrupted Celestial Lions had begun a devastating campaign of conquest across the Imperium Nihilus. World after world fell to their twisted might, each victory a perversion of their former noble purpose. On Hive World Tertius Prime, Imperial citizens cowered as the sky split open, disgorging a host of nightmarish entities. The fallen Space Marines, their once golden armor now a riot of unnatural hues and grotesque mutations, led the charge. Writhing tendrils of warp energy coiled around their limbs, granting them unholy strength. Some sported additional arms, wielding multiple weapons with deadly precision. Others had become monstrous amalgamations of flesh and metal, their bodies turned into living weapons. At the heart of this carnage strode the Chaos Lord, formerly Chapter Master Dubaku. His presence on the battlefield was a vortex of malevolent energy, sapping the will of all who beheld him. Where once he had inspired loyalty and courage, now he commanded through fear and dark charisma. As Tertius Prime burned, a cult of personality began to form around the fallen Chapter Master. Desperate citizens, driven mad by terror and psychic aftermath, worshipped him as a dark messiah. They saw in his corruption not damnation, but ascension, a path to survival in a galaxy that had abandoned them. Not all Celestial Lions had embraced this dark path willingly. Those few who resisted corruption now shambled across the battlefield as mindless spawn, their agonized howls a constant reminder of the price of defiance. In the somber halls of the fortress monastery, Leonum Custos, a chill silence descended upon the assembled battle brothers. The air grew heavy with disbelief and sorrow as Chapter Master Aurelius delivered the news that shattered their world. Their cousins, the once noble Celestial Lions, had fallen to the insidious whispers of chaos. The proud golden warriors who had stood as paragons of imperial virtue for millennia were now twisted mockeries of their former selves, their armor stained with the blood of the innocent and their souls corrupted beyond redemption. As the gravity of the situation sank in, a storm of emotion swept through the ranks of the Custodes Leonis chapter. Faces that had weathered countless battles without flinching now contorted in anguish. Brother Cassius, a veteran of 3 centuries, let out a primal roar of rage that echoed through the vaulted chamber. Others stood in stunned silence, their minds struggling to reconcile the unthinkable betrayal of their genetic kin. Chapter Master Aurelius watched his brother's reactions with a heavy heart. He had borne the weight of this knowledge alone for days, agonizing over how to share the burden with his chapter. Now, as he saw the pain etched on their faces, he knew the true test of their resolve was only beginning. "Brothers," Aurelius's voice cut through the tumult, steady and resolute. "We face a tragedy beyond measure. Our cousins have embraced the very darkness we swore to fight against. We must be the beacon of light that guides the Imperium through the storm." A tense debate erupted among the assembled warriors. Some, like Brother Cassius, called for immediate action, demanding they launch a crusade to hunt down their fallen kin. Others urged caution, warning that such a move could leave vital Imperial sectors vulnerable. The air crackled with tension as centuries-old bonds of brotherhood clashed against the cold logic of strategic necessity. Chaplain Domitius stepped forward, his skull-faced helm scanning the assembled warriors. "Brothers, hear me!" His voice resonated with authority. "Before we can hope to cleanse the galaxy of our fallen kin's corruption, we must first purify ourselves. The taint that turned the Celestial Lions from the Emperor's light may yet lurk within our own hearts. At the chaplain's words, a hush fell over the chamber. The truth of his statement struck at the core of every Marine's deepest fears. If the mighty celestial lions could fall, were any of them truly beyond corruption's reach? In the days that followed, the fortress monastery became a crucible of purification and introspection. Litanies echoed through the halls as battle brothers engaged in grueling rituals of faith and endurance. Librarians scoured the minds of their brothers for any trace of chaotic influence, while apothecaries conducted exhaustive genetic screenings to ensure their gene seed remained pure. Chapter Master Aurelius sequestered himself in his chambers, poring over ancient texts and strategic assessments. He knew that the High Lords of Terror would soon call upon them to account for their genetic line's failings. The weight of 10,000 years of proud history now hung by a thread, and it fell to him to chart a course that would preserve his chapter's honor while serving the greater needs of the Imperium. On the 7th day, Aurelius emerged from his chambers, his face etched with the lines of sleepless nights and heavy decisions. He made his way to the chapter's primary communications array, and with a prayer to the Emperor on his lips, sent a message that would seal their fate. He formally requested that the Custodes Leonis be granted the honor of leading the hunt for their fallen brothers, to right the wrongs committed in their name, and to prove their unwavering loyalty to the Imperium. The somber quiet that had settled over the fortress monastery was shattered by the blaring of klaxons. Battle brothers rushed to their positions, their movements honed by centuries of discipline. In the command center, Chapter Master Dubaku's face was a mask of grim determination as he received the astropathic transmission. The news was dire. Hive world Thalassia, a vital supply hub for the sector, had erupted in rebellion. As the Thunderhawks roared to life, carrying the celestial lions towards their latest battleground, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of many warriors' stomachs. They had faced countless threats before, but this time was different. The report spoke of human cultists wearing the colors of their fallen brothers, chanting praises to dark powers in a twisted mockery of imperial litanies. The descent to Thalassia's surface was a hellish experience. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky, while psychic screams assaulted the minds of even the most stalwart Marines. As the drop pods slammed into the rockcrete of the Hive's upper levels, the full extent of the corruption became clear. What had once been a shining example of imperial productivity was now a nightmare landscape of flesh-warped architecture and demonic sigils. Sergeant Cato led his squad through the twisting corridors of Hive Primus, each step bringing them deeper into madness. The air was thick with the stench of corruption, and shadows seemed to move with malevolent purpose. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with the enemy. Cato's breath caught in his throat. The cultists before them wore scraps of golden armor, their eyes gleaming with unholy fervor as they recognized the celestial lions. "Brothers!" one of the cultists cried, his voice a mixture of reverence and madness. "You have come to join us in our ascension." The words struck like physical blows, each syllable a reminder of their chapter's fall from grace. Cato's chainsword roared to life, drowning out the heretic's words as he charged forward. The battle that followed was brutal and personal, each swing of a blade or pull of a trigger laden with the weight of betrayal. Across the Hive, similar scenes played out. Imperial guardsmen found themselves fighting against their own kin, neighbors and friends twisted by the corrupting touch of chaos. The psychological toll was immense. Many broke under the strain, their minds unable to reconcile the horrors before them with the world they had known. In the Hive's central spire, Chaplain Ekweme led a desperate assault to reclaim the planetary Vox array. His skull-faced helm was a beacon of righteous fury as he cut through waves of cultists. But with each foe he struck down, doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. How had it come to this? How had their brothers fallen so far? The battle for Thalassia raged for weeks, each day bringing new horrors and fresh despair. The Celestial Lions fought with a fervor born of shame and anger, determined to erase the stain on their honor. But even as they reclaimed ground, the true architects of this rebellion remained elusive. It was in the depths of Hive Secundus that they finally encountered their fallen brothers. A squad of Chaos Space Marines, their once golden armor now a twisted mockery of its former glory, stood guard over a pulsing warp portal. The sight of these corrupted warriors, still bearing the insignia of the Celestial Lions, sent shockwaves through the loyalist forces. The battle that ensued was apocalyptic in scale. Brother fought against brother, each side fueled by a righteous certainty in their cause. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp around them as the warp portal pulsed with malevolent energy. In the end, it was Chaplain Ekweme who made the decisive move. With a prayer to the Emperor on his lips, he charged into the heart of the enemy formation, his Crozius Arcanum blazing with holy light. The portal collapsed in a thunderous implosion, taking with it the last of the Chaos Marines. But as the dust settled, a bitter realization set in. The architects of this rebellion had escaped, slipping away to sow discord elsewhere in the sector. In the aftermath of the battle for Thalassia, the echoes of battle still reverberated through the ruins of Hive Secundus as the Celestial Lions surveyed the aftermath of their Pyrrhic victory. Chapter Master Dubaku stood atop a mound of rubble, his once gleaming golden armor now scorched and dented from weeks of relentless combat. The acrid smell of promethium hung heavy in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of spilled blood. His eyes, weary from the horrors they had witnessed, scanned the devastation before him. As the dust settled, an uneasy silence fell over the battlefield. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Countless battle brothers lay among the wreckage, their lives sacrificed in defense of a world that now lay in ruins. Dubaku's hearts ached with the weight of their loss, each fallen warrior a testament to the chapter's unwavering dedication to their duty. But even as the Celestial Lions mourned their dead, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Ancient war machines, long forgotten in the depths of time, stirred in hidden vaults across the sector. The desperate struggle against the fallen chapter had pushed the Imperium to consider unthinkable measures. Whispers of reactivating mothballed Horus Heresy-era weapons and battle plans spread through the ranks of the Imperial forces like wildfire. The controversy sparked by this decision reopened old wounds, wounds that had never truly healed in the 10,000 years since the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne. Veterans of countless campaigns shuddered at the thought of unleashing such terrible power once more. They remembered all too well the devastation wrought during that dark age of betrayal, when brother turned against brother and the fate of humanity hung by a thread. Yet, as reports of the fallen chapter's continued advance reached Imperial High Command, the voices calling for the deployment of these ancient weapons grew louder. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and the shadow of chaos loomed ever larger over the beleaguered worlds of the Imperium Nihilus. Thus began a frantic quest to locate and reactivate these long-hidden war assets. Tech priests and magos scoured dusty archives and forgotten data vaults, seeking any clue that might lead them to the resting places of these formidable weapons. Many had been concealed for millennia, their locations obscured by layers of secrecy and misdirection. As the first of these terrible machines were unearthed and brought back online, a palpable sense of unease spread through the Imperial forces. The sheer destructive potential of these weapons was awe-inspiring, Yet it came at a terrible price. The taint of the heresy clung to them like a shroud, a constant reminder of the darkness that had nearly consumed humanity. As preparations began for a pivotal battle, where these weapons would be unleashed at full capacity, the Fallen Chapter fortified a vital system, using it as a staging ground for further incursions into Imperial space. The decision was made to bring the full might of the recovered Heresy-era arsenal to bear against this stronghold. The battle that followed would go down in Imperial records as one of the most devastating engagements since the dark days of the Horus Heresy, a crucible in which the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The war-torn landscape of the Imperium Nihilus stretched out before the battered Imperial forces, a testament to the relentless assault of chaos. Yet in this moment of desperation, an unexpected shift in the cosmic balance was about to unfold. On the fringes of Imperial space, Xenos fleets began to gather, their motives as inscrutable as their alien forms. As reports of Xenos activity flooded in, Imperial commanders faced an impossible decision. Inquisitor Tolle convened an emergency council aboard her flagship. The gathered leaders argued fiercely over the course of action. "This is heresy!" thundered an Astartes captain, his ceramite-clad fist slamming down on the hololithic display. "To ally with Xenos filth goes against everything we stand for." A grizzled Lord General countered, "We've lost half the sector already. If we don't act drastically, there won't be an Imperium left to defend." Pragmatism won out over dogma. Reluctant overtures were made to the Xenos forces. In a neutral system, human and alien leaders met face to face. The Aeldari Autarch spoke in riddles, the Tau commander offered technological marvels, and Necron cryptex participated with emotionless facades. As negotiations concluded, the first joint human-Xenos military action commenced. The battlefield became a clash of wildly different combat doctrines and technologies. Imperial Guard regiments fought alongside Tau Fire warriors, their lasguns a stark contrast to sleek pulse rifles. Space Marines coordinated assaults with Aeldari aspect warriors, each race's tactics complementing the other in unexpected ways. The air crackled with malevolent power as a massive wave of warp energy surged towards the combined forces. The smell of ozone and decay filled their nostrils as reality itself seemed to warp and twist. It felt like every atom in their bodies was being pulled apart and reassembled, straining against the corrupting influence. The reactions of Imperial citizens to this alliance were mixed. Many recoiled in horror at Xenos warriors striding through human streets. Riots broke out on some planets, fueled by fear and xenophobic propaganda. Others, who had witnessed the relentless onslaught of chaos, welcomed any aid that might turn the tide. Political fallout was immediate and severe. Hardline factions within the Adeptus Terra decried the move as damnation. Planetary governors who cooperated with Xenos forces were branded traitors by orthodox peers. The schism threatened to tear apart what little unified resistance remained against chaos. Yet, as the combined force pushed back against corruption, progress was made. Worlds thought lost were reclaimed, warp storms contained. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope began to spread through the Imperium Nihilus, born from the most unlikely of alliances. The skies above the war-torn planet darkened as fleets of Imperial, Xenos, and Chaos vessels materialized from the warp. The air crackled with energy as reality strained under the weight of the unholy ritual on the surface. This was the final battle, a desperate struggle to determine the fate of the fallen celestial lions and potentially the entire Imperium Nihilus. On the ground, armies clashed in a cacophony of weapons fire and battle cries. Space Marines in tarnished golden armor fought alongside their former brothers, now twisted by chaos. Eldar aspect warriors, darted between hulking orc mobs, their graceful movements a stark contrast to the brutish violence around them. Even the emotionless Necrons joined the fray, their Gauss weapons carving swathes through the endless tide of demons pouring from newly formed warp rifts. At the heart of this maelstrom stood the fallen chapter master of the Celestial Lions, his once noble form now a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and warp-forged armor. The demon sword pulsed in his grip, each heartbeat drawing more power from the swirling vortex of energy that threatened to tear the planet apart. Around him, corrupted librarians chanted in eldritch tongues, their minds straining to channel the raw power of the warp. Amidst the chaos, Brother Captain Nkosi led the loyalist remnants of the Celestial Lions. His face was a mask of determination and sorrow as he cut down former battle brothers, each kill a fresh wound on his soul. As he neared the ritual site, he found his path blocked by a towering figure in Terminator armor, the corrupted form of Chaplain Ekweme. "Brother," the fallen chaplain's voice rasped, "why do you resist? Can you not see the power that awaits us?" Nkosi's response was a roar of defiance as he charged, his power sword clashing against Ekweme's Crozius Arcanum. The two warriors, once the closest of brothers, now fought with a ferocity born of betrayal and shattered trust. As the battle reached its fever pitch, the fabric of reality began to tear. Larger and more terrifying demons poured through the widening rifts, their presence causing weaker-willed combatants to flee in terror or fall to their knees in madness. The air filled with the screams of the dying and the laughter of thirsting gods. In orbit, Imperial Navy vessels launched desperate bombardments, trying to stem the tide of demonic incursion. Their efforts were matched by strange crescent-shaped Necron ships that fired beams of eerie green energy into the warp rifts. For a moment, it seemed as if the combined firepower might be enough to turn the tide. But the fallen chapter master was not to be denied. With a triumphant roar, he plunged the demon sword into the heart of the vortex. The planet shuddered, and for a moment, all fighting ceased, as every being on the surface was overcome by a wave of pure, unfiltered warp energy. In that moment of clarity, Nkosi saw the full scope of what his chapter had become. The pride that had driven them to such extremes, the desperation that had led them to embrace the very forces they had sworn to destroy. He saw the faces of every battle brother he had lost, every civilian they had failed to protect, every compromise that had led them to this point. As the battle raged on, Nkosi raised his sword and prepared to make his final stand, the fate of his chapter hanging in the balance. The smoke-choked skies over the ruined sector finally cleared, revealing a landscape forever changed by war. Once thriving imperial worlds lay in ruins, their population decimated and infrastructure shattered. The immediate chaos threat had been pushed back, but at a cost that left even hardened veterans questioning the nature of victory. An uneasy peace descended upon the battered worlds. Former allies eyed each other with suspicion, their bonds strained by shared trauma. Inquisitorial agents moved swiftly through refugee camps, searching for any hint of chaos taint. Rebuilding seemed insurmountable. Silent hive cities stood with toppled spires, their depths infested with horrors. Agri-worlds were reduced to toxic wastelands. Survivors huddled in fortified enclaves, haunted by memories of endured horrors. Harsh measures rooted out lingering chaos influence. Populations underwent rigorous screening, with swift judgment for those found wanting. Execution rates soared as paranoia gripped both enforcers and enforced. The fate of surviving traitor space marines sparked debate. Some argued for immediate execution, while others saw value in studying their gene seed to prevent future betrayals. This highlighted the complex nature of corruption and redemption in the grim, far future. Psychological scars ran deep. Guardsmen relived nightmarish battles, civilians woke screaming, and even space marines showed signs of strain. As news spread, questions arose about defensive strategies and the extent of the chaos threat. A chilling revelation emerged. Evidence suggested an ancient Xenos race had orchestrated the conflict. This sent shockwaves through Imperial Command, raising questions about the true nature of threats facing humanity. Long-term consequences became apparent. Trust in Imperial institutions eroded, replaced by paranoia. Once prosperous worlds faced centuries of recovery. Survivors struggled with rising rates of mental illness and social unrest. The Imperium stood at a crossroads. As fresh reports of Xenos activity arrived, humanity faced a choice: evolve and overcome, or risk falling victim to the same machinations. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, awaiting decisions that would shape the Imperium's future. In the grim darkness of the far future, a once noble Space Marine chapter's fall serves as a chilling reminder of corruption's ever-present threat. Their descent into chaos echoes through the vast emptiness of the Imperium Nihilus, warning all who stand against the darkness. As their humanity flickered out, consumed by the evil they once fought, we ponder the true cost of survival in a universe of unending war. The tragedy of these fallen heroes raises an unsettling question. In a realm where nightmares lurk in every shadow, can anyone remain uncorrupted? The answer, like the Imperium's fate, remains shrouded in uncertainty.